It is 4 p.m. We're developing news.
And the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao. Some stores are watching this Thursday, March 26. Oil industry groups warn there is no confirmed delivery of petroleum supplies beyond April, citing difficulties in securing crude, plus high global prices. Companies including Petron, Shell, and Chevron said they are working to import lower specification fuels and have requested government assistance, including temporary excess tax relief, to ease financial pressures. Meantime, lawmakers warn the uncertainty could send the GDP crashing, drive inflation to 8.6%, and cause widespread economic disruption. That is, if no consolidated plan is implemented.
Palace spokesperson Claire Castro urged the public not to judge Energy Secretary Sharon Garin amid criticism over the skyrocketing price of petroleum. Castro said Garin and DOE employees are working long hours to address the situation. The group, Manibela, has called on Garin's resignation today, the first day of the nationwide transport strike.
The Energy Regulatory Commission, or the ERC, has ordered the nationwide suspension of the wholesale electricity spot market, or WESM, starting March 26 amid supply risks and volatile power prices. The ERC says the WESM will operate under special guidelines from the DOE. A modified administered pricing mechanism is also being finalized to reflect rising global fuel costs. Meantime, the ERC says electricity or power rates may increase in April due to the ongoing Middle East conflict and the peso's weakness against the dollar. This comes as higher generation costs could be passed on to distribution utilities and reflected in consumers' bills.
The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas decided to hold its key policy rate at 4.25% amid inflation risks. The central bank cited ongoing tensions in the Middle East, which have driven up global oil and fertilizer prices and contributed to higher domestic fuel costs and transport fares. Despite these price pressures, the BSP said near-term inflation risks are largely supply-driven, limiting the impact of monetary policy. It also flagged weak economic growth prospects for 2026, warning that a rate hike at this stage could delay recovery. China says its door is open to a dialogue on joint oil exploration in the South China Sea. It urged the Philippines, though, to, quote, show sincerity before negotiations can resume. The Chinese embassy in Manila responded to President Marcos's comments that the global energy crisis caused by the Iran war could push both countries to reach a joint exploration deal. The embassy said the past discussions made positive progress and called joint development the, quote-unquote, right path to uphold peace and stability in disputed waters.
And joining us in a little bit will be our resident political heckler, Mr. Ronald Llamas. He's still on the way here. But in the meantime, from the Philippine Star, we already have Editor-in-Chief, Ami Pamintuan.
Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Not so happy Thursday pa rin.
Happy na. Malapit ng Biyernes eh. Isang tulog na lang.
Ngayon lang, nalalapit na. Tuloy-tuloy pa naman yung bad news natin.
Oh, what happened to finding the positive in everything, Ami? Ko talaga.
Wala wala akong makakita ngayong araw.
Okay, ako meron.
Except, sige, ikaw.
Well, the BSP, i-recap ko lang, the BSP just called an off-cycle meeting to discuss the benchmark policy rate. To those who don't follow monetary policy, off-cycle meetings are very rare, and they only usually call it during times of crises, i.e. right now. Hindi nila pinilitan yung key policy rate because the issue is this crisis is being driven by the supply side, meaning the supply of fuel, supply of oil. Hindi siya demand side. Their tools do not work as well on the demand side, on the supply side. If the problem is the supply, because what can anyone do at this point, right? If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, so they talked about it, imagined a lot of scenarios and decided the best path at this point is still to hold steady on the rate at 4.25%. However, yung inflation expectations are still well anchored daw. Now, the target rate for inflation of the BSP for this year is still between 2 to 4%. The danger there is if this drags on, if this war drags on and oil prices continue rising unmitigated, then we would have a big problem. Governor Eli Remolona admitted.
We're still on target with inflation?
Well anchored,
By-
meaning the expectations, they look at all the data. They said they look at, when it comes to oil supply and oil prices, tinitingnan nila yung Dubai prices, tinitingnan nila yung Brent WTI prices, tinitingnan nila yung mean of Platts in Singapore, etc., etc. So they look at data across the board to come up with this decision and decided that at this point, their inflation expectations are still well anchored. However, nga, depending on how this goes, we might breach the high end of that 2 to 4% inflation target. Baka
Pero medyo nagso-soften ng oil prices and medyo nalilift ng konti yung ibang markets kasi mukhang totoong may kausap si Trump eh. He's talking about a 15-point plan. He's talking about a 15-point plan. Hindi binobroker ng Pakistan nga daw. So yung nagsasalita, yung nag-iinsulto sa kanya, mukhang hindi nang kausap niya.
Baka hindi in yung
He's
nangasal sa
talking
kanya.
with a different group na kung sakasakali,
there's
pwedeng pumalit.
there are reports on
Yeah.
international media that it could be the Iranian foreign minister who has
Yeah.
been talking to
And even Wang Yi, no? Yeah. That China is getting into the picture. Pati sila nahihirapan eh.
yeah.
Tumataas na rin yung
Yeah.
presyo ng langis ng
I mean,
gasolina sa kanila.
Yung oil, even though China has a lot of reserves, yung oil
Yeah.
that goes through
They're affected.
the Strait of Hormuz are majority bought by China. So they are the biggest consumers of that oil. Pero of course, their offsetting factor is the fact that marami silang reserves. Now, on the BSP again, of course, the question was, we are now at about 60 pesos to the dollar. At what point will the BSP intervene? Sagot ni Governor Remolona, they don't intervene, and sinabi na rin nila to dati, they don't intervene unless there are wild swings in the price. That's the only time that they're going to
Steady naman eh,
intervene.
di ba?
Yeah.
Pero-
Steady rising.
Pero may
Hindi, medyo dahan-dahan lang naman.
Hindi siya wild swings. Well, swing
Hindi
kasi
siya
it's
wild
like,
swings.
it's like
Hindi
that.
siya wild swing.
Pag wild swings kasi sobrang irregular na yun. Pero ito expected,
Yeah.
more or less expected naman kahit pa, as we keep saying on the show, even before the war, may expectations talaga na humina to the 60 level. However, having said that, sabi niya, there are also thresholds for their expectations. Pero hindi niya sinabi, he can't say what these are. Meaning, at what point does the weak peso start bleeding into inflation? Kasi masyadong mahal na yung imports natin, it starts, pushing up inflation. He didn't say what that level is, but he says we have thresholds, and if that threshold is breached, then we will act. So, pero-
hindi lang yung peso pati yung private hospitals ngayon, sabi nila, they might increase hospital fees by 5%. Sabi sa'yo, wala akong makitang positive ngayong araw eh. Except yun na nga, kinakausap ni Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, mukhang yung Foreign Minister ng Iran, para, buksan nyo na yung Yan.
Yeah, but we
Something
just like to
positive dahil
hope
kakampi ng Iran ng
we just like
it's
to
the
hope that
biggest
whatever
market.
deal is struck is
Yeah.
basically going to be endorsed and supported by whoever's in charge in Tehran.
Yan na nga.
The last
Kaya
thing
yun yung
you'd want
kausap
is
ng China.
the last thing you'd want is magkasundo sila in Islamabad, tapos pagdating sa Tehran,
Hindi, mabuti na nga yung dahil alam natin na malaking kakampi ng Iran, ng China. And they're getting into the picture kasi they're feeling the pain also.
yeah. Well, everyone's feeling the pain, except of course the oil companies. Just
nga.
to break the news,
Humarap na oil companies kanina.
just to break the news, the peso closed at 60.23 to the dollar today, just now. 60.23, almost the same level as the record low, which is 60.30. 60 spot 30.
Kaya hindi nga siya wild swing, di ba?
So, and the problem with these currency depreciations is once nandun ka na sa level na yun, it's very, very hard to get back up. mukhang we could be hovering around this level for a while.
Yung mga oil company, sabi nila, ang issue ngayon, yung VAT na dahil ayaw i-buy excise tax. Dapat bilis-bilisan na ni President Marcos kasi nafo-focus tuloy atensyon ng mga tao. Doon sa value-added tax, mas malaki. It's 12%.
Yes.
Hinihingi yun ngayon ng transport sector na nag-umpisa na ng strike. Pati yung oil companies, pagharap kanina, sabi nila, okay lang naman sa amin, natanggalin yung VAT. Of course, because it goes to the government.
Yeah, they don't lose anything on that.
Yeah. Kaya sabi nila, okay lang sa amin. Kaya ayun, yung hinihingi ng pati VAT ngayon, hinihingi na tuloy. Kasi matatagalan, ayaw excise tax
Oy, but Bok, I read RA 12316. I forget the number.
12316, correct.
That's the one. Nakita ko yung 30-day averaging dun sa $80 per barrel, and that will be the basis, if at all, for suspending.
1
Pero
month.
wala akong nakitang proviso that says that anytime
Sa
before
emergency.
that pwede silang mag-suspend ng excise taxes.
Kaya parang binalik lang nila yung nasa train this is an emergency.
Yeah. So
Diba?
so in other words, we'll have to wait for 1 month talaga. And even before we hit that
Kaya
1
hinahanap
month,
ko kailan ba nag-umpisa yung 80?
And
Nag-umpisa siya mid-March lang Early March. We have to wait at least about 2 weeks pa siguro.
but that's also assuming
For
that
that 1
it's
month.
retroactive counting. That I'm not
Hindi yung
sure if it's clear.
preceding. The month, yung date preceding the order. Kaya mako-cover siya preceding daw Ewan ko kung nandyan yung word Preceding daw the
Okay,
order.
I'll have to
Kaya
review.
mako-cover siya.
Yeah.
I mentioned that
Dapat,
kasi, for example, a law will only take effect 15 days after publication. So it only takes effect 15 days from the time it was published in the Gazette. And
Sundan na lang kaya yung oil deregulation law. Sundan na lang yung oil deregulation
so that's
law,
only
di ba,
half of
pag
it.
emergency
The other
court.
half is kung
Saka
sakaling
pag hindi in session,
Yeah.
di ba? Pag hindi in session ng Congress,
Yeah. The
the
other
President can act, di ba, immediately.
the other half is
Well, the other half nga is how we translate this. Is it are we looking at a retroactive data based on when it went above $80, or upon implementation of the law, that's when you start counting a 30-day average?
it sounds like
Proceeding daw the order,
if the word proceeding is in it, it sounds like they can retroactively
Retroactive.
apply
Retroactive,
it. Have we had 30 straight days of wala pa This is week 3 of the war.
Wala pa.
So
Mga first or second week lang ng March na umpisa.
I guess they could start counting from the early
Yeah.
March.
Okay. Well, I'll look it up again. I didn't notice that the word proceeding, but maybe it's there. But yeah, it's going to be it's going to be something to look at kung
Okay,
sakali.
na-publish sa official gazette 7 hours ago, so we can start counting 15 days from now.
That's how laws are implemented.
Weekday
15
ba
days
to?
after publication.
I know.
It's not calendar days.
Okay, it's not calendar days.
No, sorry. It's
calendar
days. It's not session days.
Oh, it's not session days. Okay, na-publish niya sa,
Wala.
sa official
Wala naman
gazette.
session yan
of the
Calendar day yan.
Official Gazette of the Philippines. It's right there. Anyone can
The
go
things you
in.
have to watch out for.
So it officially becomes law 15
Pero hindi
days from
maganda
now.
yan
Uy, you know, it's only...
Inaasahan ng lahat siya na immediate relief
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ngayon, maghihintay pala tayo. Magkakaroon ng blowback sa presidente.
Yes.
And
So,
not only that, it's not automatic, di ba? Even if you hit 30 days of continuous prices above $80, hindi automatic naman yan na sususpend ng excise taxes. The president is just empowered once that
And he may
threshold
not
is
even
reached.
suspend.
You
It
would-
might only be reduction.
but you guys would think he would do that, right? I mean, what's the point of this RA otherwise?
But
nga,
remember,
ano ba naman yan, kalokohan?
his announcement late last week was what we have to figure out pa when the best time to do this is going
The
to
best
be.
time daw.
Reminds me of
He waffled for a while.
Reminds me of ICI. At the
Oh, di
start,
ba?
it was all rara.
He was waffling.
Teka lang.
If that's such a word.
Ami is correct. There is the word proceeding here. So, the actual rule says the president may, upon the recommendation of the DBCC, suspend the imposition or reduce excise taxes on fuel under this section when average Dubai crude oil price based on the mean of Platts in Singapore
Mean of Platts.
reaches or exceeds 80 USD per barrel for 1 month immediately preceding the issuance
wait.
of the suspension.
That's preceding the issuance of the suspension, not preceding the passage of the law.
Hindi, kaya nga. Kaya nga.
So it's
you
not
have-
right.
he has to-
Magbibilang
he-
pa rin siya ng 1
It's-
month.
it's-
So, pwede pa rin.
So he has to call it. Let's say he calls it.
Bibilang ka.
Let's say he calls it on April 3. So justified pa rin because
Kung
he
naka
calls
1
it.
month na yung 80, pwede na.
No, I'll go through. Sorry, 80 US dollars per barrel for 1 month preceding the issuance of the suspension or reduction order. So
Kaya nga.
it's not 1 month preceding the passage of the law, but 1 month preceding
it's the order.
his order to
Yes,
suspend
kaya nga.
taxes.
Yeah.
Kaya nga.
That's why
Kaya
Ami.
pwede ka magbilang ng
That's
ano.
why Ami was saying. Well, that's why it's not automatic. It doesn't automatically kick in. He still has to call the suspension or the reduction first. And then,
Oo.
and then now he has legal basis to do so
Yeah.
because of this.
Now, what I'm saying is that you were not we're not necessarily counting the weeks before today. When
Hindi,
or
from
days
the
before today.
order. Not from today nga, from the order.
Mm-hmm.
Kapag nag-order siya, halimbawa kung March 8 nag-umpisa yung 80, April 8. Pag nag-issue siya ng April 8, pwede na yung 1 month na yon. Pwede na siya magbilang ng 1 month.
Correct.
Actually, ang average is not 80 kasi ang tagal-tagal ng 100 yung crude oil. Ang tas-tas na nung average actually.
So what I'm saying basically is that at the very least we'll have to wait for a month and a half before.
Hindi, 1 month lang.
Hindi,
So-
15
Kasi
days ang
nag-umpisa siya mga first week of March or almost mid-March
nagsimula ang pag-akyat
Kaya
ng
mga 2
presyo.
or 3 weeks pa, yung 80, yung 80. Matagal na tayo nagdurusa. Ano ba, kailan ka ba bumili ng
I don't think
gasolina?
we're understanding the
Ah.
same thing. Well, sige. I'll review this again, but I think we're not understanding the same thing.
Hindi.
I'm not talking about
Kasi pag
retroactivity.
nag-issue siya ng order, bibilangin niya yung 1 month. Kung kailan nag-umpisa yung 80, averaging for 1 month. Pag after that, at the end of that 1 month, pwede niya siya mag-issue ng order.
Here's the other problem.
Ah.
Excise taxes are collected at the borders, at import, right? So pag sinabi mong suspended the excise taxes from today onwards, from today pa lang, you can't apply it retroactively unless you're gonna return some of the money, which I doubt, some of the tax that was already paid. Diba? Like the implementation mechanism, I'm not sure how it works. How do you? Well, it would have to be proactive.
Yeah.
Applied to the future excise taxes. Hindi pwedeng retroactive.
Ewan ko, tanong-tanong natin yung dapat meron tayo ditong dapat yung yung mag-i-implement ng law. Tanungin natin kung ano exactly yan.
I think because they were also still talking about it at some point. Diba?
Yeah.
They called in the DOE to weigh in on the versions of the bill of the law. But it's
Pag
1,
naghintay
2,
sila
3,
na
1,
naghintay
6.
at na-resolve tong issue, nakaiintay, malaking kahit magkaroon na tayo ng relief, it's going to weigh on the president. Na too late the hero ka.
In the meantime, we have with us right now
Political heckler.
our international man of mystery, si Mr. Ronald Llamas.
Too late the hero din.
Too late
Too
the
late
hero.
the hero.
Bumati ka naman dyan.
Magandang hapon po. Yung mga natatraffic, pasensya na po. Akala natin makawalan yung mababawasan ng traffic dahil sa taas ng gasolina.
Extra init ngayong araw Sabi ng pag-asa, extra init ngayong
Yeah.
araw. Baka pumala ng 41
Ay,
degrees
marami
yung
na daw ngayon na yung
heat
heat index, marami na daw lugar na 40 degrees. Heat index, not the temperature.
Yeah. 41
Heat
degrees
index,
daw max.
dumadami na yung lugar.
Which means, gagamit ka ng more electricity dahil sa aircon.
O kaya kahit ventilador, din naman yun electricity. Ayan marami na daw na
What's the-
40.
Teka, si Arles nag-iintay na. Baka mamaya biglang umiska mo to. Ipasok natin ang ating mojo na si Arles de los Santos giving us report from Cubao, Quezon City. Yung mga transport groups dyan. Arles, balita mo kami.
Kami, Bok Ed, Reg at Ronald, nandito nga tayo ngayon sa Cubao, sa Quezon City, kung saan nandito pa rin yung ilan sa mga kasapi ng No to Oil Price Hike Coalition. Ito yung sama-sama mga grupo ng transport groups, sector, at syempre ng mga manggagawa at other civil society groups. Ayan ay parang ipanawagan pa din yung pag-cancela na nga ng oil deregulation law or yung pagbasura rather, and yung pagsuspende na agad ng excise tax at yung VAT na alam ko pinag-uusapan ninyo kanina at ayon sa kanila ito daw yung nakaka-apekto talaga sa kanilang pang-araw-araw na pamamasada. Maliit na raw talaga yung kanilang kinikita at nagkaroon nga tayo dito na pagkakataon na makausap yung ilang mga driver na meron pinagtigil na muna yung sa pag-aaral yung kanyang anak. Yung iba naman dito na hindi na pumasada muna ngayon, tiniis muna na walang kitain para lang maipahayag nga yung kanilang posisyon dito, habang yung mga asawa naman ng mga tsuper na nagsasilbi ng mga konduktora habang pumapasada ang kanilang mga mister ay tumulong din kung saan sila yung naghahanda ng mga pagkain nito. Sama-sama silang kumain dito kanina at pagdating nga ng tanghali pasado alas 12 ay nagkaroon naman ng noise barrage, yung mahabang linya ng mga TNVS, taxi, motorcycle ride-hailing app drivers at yung iba pang mga commuter at mga nagmamaneho, motorista na nagpahayag din nga ng kanilang suporta at posisyon dito sa patuloy na pagtaas ng presyo ng petrol. At kung tataas pa raw ito, ay talagang hindi na nila kakayanin. Yung ibang araw ay ipinarada na yung kanilang mga unit at naghahanap na lamang ng ibang mga trabaho.
Arles, kamusta ba yung yung mga choke points? In the past kasi, ay pag merong transport strike, may mga choke points na hinaharangan yung mga nagwewelga. Yung iba nga naglalagay pa ng mga spikes para hindi umandar o masabotahe yung mga jeepney. Meron bang ganun dyan? At gaano ka-effective at this point yung transport strike? Usually ang usapin ng transport strike ay paralysis . May ganun bang paralysis na nakikita ka? Ang dami kasing dumadaan sa likod mo .
Ronald, actually itong Cubao kasi, ito nga yung tinatawag ngayon. Ewan ko kung before pa man ito, na parang center of the universe nga raw. Kasi kung papunta ka ng Marikina, papunta ka ng Antipolo, papunta ka ng Quezon City, Valenzuela, o papunta ka ng Pasig, halos lahat ng pwedeng masakyan ay nandito na. Sa taas nga lang natin ay nandito yung LRT, and then pag lumakad ka ng konti, nandun yung MRT. And so far, mula rito kaninang umaga, nakikita natin, banayad naman yung pagsakay at pagbaba ng mga computer. Marami pa din yung mga pumapasada. Yung iba nga dito mga tsuper, tinatawag yung mga kasama nila at nila pinipigilan habang ito na pumasada. Pero nung tinanong natin, wala raw silang magagawa kasi it's either wala silang kitain at walang pagkain or mag-TDS na may kikitain nga pero kulang-kulang pa rin naman. So yung iba, mas papunta doon sa latter. Kahit maliit daw yung kita, basta meron, magpapasada na sila. Hindi natin nakikita yung mga barbed wires o yung mga choke points na tinatawag. Pero sa bahagi ng Commonwealth, nakikita natin na kahapon pa lamang ay marami-rami na yung mga commuter na nahirapan makauwi. Though sinabi naman ng piston at ng manibela na baka nga kahapon pa lamang, Merkules ay maramdaman na agad itong transport strike. Dahil kahapon din kasi coincidentally yung release naman ng ayuda ng mga tsuper. So dahil yung iba, in a way, nagkaroon na ng relief at ng alalay ay hindi na raw muna pumasada and papasada na ngayong araw. So at least ayon sa piston, nasa 60 to 70% daw yung na-paralyze na mga commute ngayon. At nangyari yan sa iba't ibang bahagi ng Pilipinas. Pero so far dito, sa No to Oil Price Hike Coalition sa Cubao, Quezon City, ang kanilang center, yung pinaka-sentro ng kanilang tigil pasada.
Follow up lang, Arles. Nung panahon kasi nila, Ed, pag transport strike, ang ibig sabihin niyan, paralysis . So, ang sinasabi mo, walang ganung paralysis.
So, walang pilitan.
Oo.
Walang pilitan. Dito actually, pag tumingin tayo dito sa kanan ay kaliwa natin, makikita natin itong mga UV Express. Mula kaninang umaga, hindi naubusan yan. Sunod-sunod yung dating, yung pag-ikot. And then yung mga traditional jeepney, kung familiar man kayo dito sa sobrang animated at puno ng design ng mga jeep papuntang Antipolo at Marikina, yung stop and shop puno. May mga sumasakay pa rin ng mga commuter at nakikita nga natin dito, dumadaan lamang sila At yung iba naman, binibigyan nila ng flyers, no, yung mga computer para maintindihan. Kasi may ilan talaga na hindi nga pumasada ng mga tsuper. Hindi lamang dito sa Cubao, Quezon City, meron din sa Kamaynilaan, kung saan doon naman no, yung naging sentro ng grupong Manibela para sa kanilang tigil pasada.
Nakita ng
Arles,
picture
anong
ng...
mood niyang mga nagrarally? Kasi nakikita namin yung mga placard may mukhang masama na takbo ng mga messaging nila, no? Galit na ba? Galit na ba?
Galit na sila, Ami, at ayon nga sa kanila, baka masundan pa yung kanila mga kilos protesta at tigil pasada kung hindi pa rin ma-actionan ng pamahalaan. Dahil ayon sa kanila, oo raw, binirmahan ng Pangulo yung emergency powers na ibinigay sa kanya, pero tila raw walang konkretong pamamaraan or hakbang at date no, kung kailan nga niya yung ipatutupad na parang titimbangin pa raw. At syempre, yung kanilang paulit-ulit na posisyon, yung ilang piso lamang daw na kanilang hinihinging taas masahe, dapat malikod pa sila maibigay lamang. No? Hindi daw gaya ng mga oil companies na kahit magkano ang taas ng presyo, base syempre no, sa tinatakda ng merkado, ipapayagan ng pamahalaan. Kaya yung nais nila ay magkaroon ng control talaga yung pamahalaan dito, lalo na sa panahon ng krisis. At dito actually, kung makikita din ninyo, ito naman, mga design yan, Ami. Ito, mga chalk design. Support the strike, ang laban ng tsuper ay kasama ang mga commuter. Nagkaroon din dito ng pagtatanghal. May mga nag-perform ng awit, may mga sumayaw. Kung alam niyo man or familiar man kayo doon sa hawak mo ang beat na viral dance phase ngayon, meron din silang version yan, yung hawak mo ang jeep.
Alam ni Ed yan,
Sample
Arles.
mo nga kami, Arles. Parang hindi masyadong pumilo dyan
Ikaw ang
Feeling ko, Bok Ed, kayo ni
Ikaw ang mag-sample.
ang dapat mag-practice.
Arles,
Mag-sample.
Arles, may nakausap ka ba dyan na nakatanggap na nung 5,000 subsidy?
Meron tayo Rich dito na natanggap, na nakausap na nakatanggap na ng 5,000 subsidy. Yung iba, prioritize naman na daw nila agad yung paggamit nga nito no, sa kanilang mga produktong petrolyo. Nagpa-full tank na raw agad sila. Pero may ilan naman na pagkakasyahin, yung ilan ay gagamitin pa din sa personal na mga pangangailangan. Pero kung i-add daw nila, actually meron tayo ditong listahan ito kasi binibigay nila dito, Reg. Ito yung listahan nila kung bakit sila nagpo-protesta. Kung bakit sila nagpo-protesta. And then dito sa baba, meron kasi silang computation.
Ayun sa likod mo, Arles, nagano na sila sa likod mo.
Actually, ito yung sa kabila, ito yung mga oil companies. May kanya-kanya sila mga opinion dito. So, usapang tubo, sakim, ganis, and laban sa oil price hike. And nakalagay din dito yung profit no, ng mga oil companies na ito na patuloy nga daw na nanginginabang dito sa patuloy na taas presyo. And then dito naman sa kabilang bahagi, ayun, itigil ang gera doon sa Israel at Iran dahil Pilipinas nga daw yung kasama sa mga apektadong bansa. And ayun, yung oil deregulation law at yung VAT alisin ng araw. Then, going back dito sa kanilang computation, kung aabot daw yung diesel ng 130 kada litro and then kakailanganin nila kumonsumo ng 30 liters in an average araw-araw, kakailanganin daw nila ng 3,900 pesos. Sa isang araw lamang yan. So kung 5,000 yung magiging ayuda na kanila tatanggapin or sabihin na natin 6,500 kasi meron pang 1,000 sa mga tsuper mula doon sa DOTR, pakaisa o dalawang araw. Humigit kumulang 2 araw lamang nila mapapakinabangan niya.
Arles, nakita ko dyan si Congressman Tino ng Makabayan Black. Isang grupo yan kasi ng transport workers, pero marami kasing transport groups. Halimbawa, nandyan ba ang Pasang Mazda, etc. Dahil kung piston lang, hindi mo mapaparalyze yan talaga. So wala ba dyan yung ibang mga transport groups?
Dito, Ronald, mas madami talaga yung mga miyembro ng piston at yung mga manggagawa at mga estudyante na dito pumosisyon. At kanina, tama ka nga, nandito si Acting Church Party List Representative Antonio Tino, gayon din si Gabriela Women's Party Representative Sara Elago at Kabataan Party List Representative Renico. No? At nagpahayag din sila ng kanilang posisyon dito sa nangyayaring issue. Pero parang other than that, hindi tayo nakakita ng Pasang Mazda. Pero yung grupo ng mga TNBS drivers at motorcycle ride-hailing app ay nagpakita ng suporta dito. At actually, kaninang mga pasado alas 12, yung noise barrage, pagkatapos noon, nagkaroon sila ng press conference and then nagkaroon dito ng traffic and after noon, nag-disperse na rin. Pero yung mga grupo na yun, Ronald, ay nagpatay ng kanilang mga application to para nga hindi magamit o hindi makabiyahe at walang mabook yung ating mga computer na kapatid.
You know, I was
Anong
looking
mga
at the
option
prices,
nila, Arles?
Arles.
Mukhang-
I was looking at the prices kasi ang diesel nasa 120 ngayon, di ba? Thereabouts.
Plus.
130 plus.
Ang 5,000 piso, 40 litro lang yan. Parang isang full tank lang yan.
Yes.
So, hindi siya talaga magtatagal.
30 jeep eh.
At most, 2 araw
30
yung
jeep.
subsidy.
At most, kalahati, no?
SUV,
Two and a half ata. Parang gano'n. Depende pa kung biyahe. Kasi yung iba, ang ginagawa, yung 30 liters na ginagamit nila sa isang araw, parang nasa 5 biyahe. Balikan na yon, no? So, total parang 10. 10 papunta. 5 papunta, 5 pabalik. So, 30 liters yon. Yung iba nagpapawas na. Ginagawa na lang 6 or 5 na balikan na yung total. Yung pang-5 ride nila, diretso ng garahe pagkatapos noon. And then pagkakasya na lamang nila yung magkano kikitain nila. Though, swerte, yung mga chuper, nakanila na mismo yung unit. Pero kasi karamihan daw sa mga membro ng piston, nagpa-boundary pa
May
rin.
boundary ka.
Assuming Ed, na hindi
pala,
tataas yung pagkain mo.
Oo, iba pa
Pero
yun.
hindi lang
Iba
naman
pa
yung
yun.
gas na tataas, yung pagkain mo
Arles, may
tataas
mga
din.
misis na kasama dyan eh. Anong sabi nila? How are they coping? Kasi karamihan dyan, syempre may mga anak yan. Nung COVID, natatandaan ko, nagtinda na lang sila ng ng mga gulay sa itlog. Meron ba silang mga ginagawang ganyan ngayon na just to augment the income?
Wala sa ngayon, Amim, no? Wala tayo na itanong na gano'n at nakuha ang mga sagot kung ano yung diskarte nila. Kasi so far, yung mga misis na mga chuper na kasama dito, sila yung naghanda ng mga pananghalian. And then, sila yung nagkukonduktor sa mga asawa nilang chuper kapag pumapasada. No? Pero kahit wala raw silang kitain ngayon, tiis muna. And actually, mas nabubuhayin daw sila no, sa ganito nilang hakbang. Kasi at least nararamdaman at makikita raw ng publiko yung kanilang nararanasan. Pero tayo dito pero na nakausap kanina, pinatigil na raw muna na pag-aaral yung anak. Swerte na lang talaga na pa-end na rin yung school year no? And nakabawas-bawas daw kahit papaano ng kanilang gastos.
Ronald.
Okay.
Alam mo, nung panahon ni Ronald kasi, ano yan eh, pag nag-transport strike.
Paralyzed talaga.
Oo, hindi, tsaka usually hinaharangan yung
Natatawa ako sa
biyahe.
nung panahon ni Ronald, hindi dun sa transport strike. Kasi nag-react siya eh. Ano naman daw yung
Diba?
pagkakaiba ng panahon ninyo
Nung panahon
dalawa?
namin, pagka
sige,
nag-transport strike, paralysis talaga. Wala nga andar.
Tapos sumama na kayo.
Okay.
Iniisa-isa yung mga driver kinakausap.
So,
Okay.
we're not seeing naman that here.
Okay.
Okay.
Alright.
Okay, maraming salamat. Arles de los Santos,
Okay.
live from Cubao, Quezon City.
Thanks, Arles.
Thank you, Arles.
You are watching Storycon on One News. We just need to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.
We've got developing news and the stories behind the headlines. Welcome back to Storycon, the Story Conference. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Regina Lay. Still with us, Ami Pamituan of the Philippine Star and Ronald Llamas, our resident political heckler. We're going to move on to our next story. We've got
Heckler ka na talaga.
Energy Regulatory Commission Chief Francis Juan suspending the wholesale electricity spot market or WESM effective midnight today, March 26. That is in keeping with the President's National Energy Emergency Declaration and is a move to mitigate price volatility due to fuel supply constraints. For the implications of this, let's bring in our first guest today. We're talking to former ERC chair and now senior partner at PJS Law, attorney Mona Lisa Di Malanta. So glad to see you again. Welcome to Storycon, attorney.
Magandang hapon po.
Hi.
Magandang hapon,
Magandang
attorney.
Attorney.
Nice to see you
Magandang
again.
hapon po sa lahat.
Attorney, so I guess the first question really is ano po yung for the people who don't understand this, ano po yung ibig sabihin nun, and what does the WESM actually do, and is this a good idea to suspend it for now?
Okay, medyo technical nga po ang WESM. WESM stands for the Wholesale Electricity Spot Market. The name, in a way, holds the key to understanding what this is. It is a market, palengke, para sa kuryente. All generators in the Philippines connected to the grid required to offer their capacity to this system, to this platform, and that's also where we call the stacking happens. So mula sa pinakamura hanggang sa pinakamahal para mapuno yung lahat ng pangangailangan natin, those are all stacked in the WESM, and those plants are dispatched usually in according to that merit order that we call. So all the power that goes to our houses are first stacked in accordance with that stacking order or merit order in the WESM.
So, attorney, ibig sabihin, yung mga prices ng ating kuryente ay dyan dinidesisyonan.
Theoretically, Sir Ronald, kasi
yeah.
po we need to understand also, and this is where the nuance comes in. That sets the price for the market, but what actually goes to our bills do not necessarily reflect what's set in the market, because utilities, distribution utilities, and electric cooperatives are also allowed to contract for their own power. So where they enter into what we call bilateral contract. So pag nangontrata sila ng kuryente, kahit na yung kakontrata nila sinabi 2 piso, tapos nag-offer sa market ng halimbawa 4 pesos or 3 pesos, ang sisingilin sa atin 2 piso. Pero kung nangkontrata sila, kung ano man yung nasa kontrata nila, yun yung sisingilin po sa atin. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that if the WESM is low or high, that we get to, as consumers, that we get to pay those bills. Only those volumes that are bought by the utilities supplied to us, that were obtained directly from the market, not out of contract, are priced according to the market.
So, ano kaya magiging impact niyan? Bakit siya sinuspende ng yung trading? Bakit sinuspende? Kasi we understand it's to stabilize yung energy cost and supply.
Opo.
Tama ba yung ganyang move?
Yun din po yung
Makaka-apekto ba
gusto
talaga siya?
nating Opo, yun din po yung gusto nating I think ipapaliwanag ng ERC, because they scheduled also public consultations on these draft rules, because it looks like it's an anticipatory measure, so that the prices will not increase. So normally market suspensions happen. That has happened even before. Usually during the summer months, if we don't have enough supply, the market is suspended because there's what we call under generation or lack of reserves. So the market is suspended in those situations. This one is a bit different. So I think ERC will be explaining how this can happen, how they envision prices to be determined. Kasi po, yung pinost din nila na draft for public consultation, dun pa lang nakalagay kung paano i-compute yung pricing. But the suspension is already in effect. So, medyo yun po yung tricky situation natin.
Ma'am, that's what I was wondering about eh. May pagbabanggit kasi doon na under the proposed scheme, coal plants, which account for mga 50 to 60% I think of our power mix, will be paid at a fixed rate. I'm not sure what that means eh. Not gas plants based on contracted prices, renewables under administered pricing preferential dispatch. Could you guide us through what these mean?
And how it will affect our
power bill.
Not only consumption, but power bills.
Power bills.
Yes. Actually, sirs and ma'ams, I think ultimately that's what counts, right? How will this affect
ma'am.
our power bills? The amounts that we will pay at the end of the month or the beginning of the following month. Especially because, as I think I mentioned earlier, distribution utilities generally contract for their requirements. About 80% of the power supplied to us as consumers are already covered by contracts. Only about 20% is contracted from the market. So what Sir Ed mentioned earlier, in the draft resolution
fixed rate,
by,
for example,
by ERC. Yeah. It's also, I think, something that ERC will explain, because why do we need to, for example, fix the price for coal contracts when, for example, a coal contract is fully contracted? Halimbawa po, yung isang coal plant, binenta na niya yung kontrata, yung planta niya, yung production niya sa isang distribution utility or electric cooperative at 4 pesos, for example. The draft talks about a 6 peso fixed rate. Eh di medyo lugi po tayo doon. Pag naka 6 pesos siya doon, pero doon sa kontrata 4 pesos, 'di ba? So dapat 4 pesos lang yung ipapasa sa atin. So medyo doon din po yung questions. But I think ERC will be prepared to explain this side. Yun pong sa preferential dispatch on RE, that's also a question because a lot of our REs are result from either the feed-in tariff or the green energy auction program where their rates were already set, resulting from that DOE contracting or auction exercise. So will this now supplant those auction prices, and will the administered price be acceptable to them, or medyo kailangan pong sagutin yon. Nat gas, nakalagay po dun sa draft, nat gas will be paid according to their contract.
Contracted
How
prices.
come it's only nat gas that will be paid according to their contracts? So I think all these things will need to be sorted out so that we can have a clear picture moving forward, and also until when this administered pricing will be in
parang walang
place. Normally
eh.
po kasi yung suspension may end date or may conditions to show when that end date would be. I think that will also need to be explained.
Ma'am,
Attorney,
do I get you right, ma'am, na most of the power that we use
Contracted
do not go through WESM. Tama ba? 80% ata are long-term contracts, meaning that's most of what we have right now. However, WESM pa rin still has a huge impact, I think, on the pricing of what we use.
Meron pong, everything goes through WESM for that stacking. But in terms
Okay.
of pricing, it's the contract that prevails over the WESM.
which means-
So to the extent,
Which means, in short, kahit pa isuspend
Kahit may gera.
yung WESM, that's not going to trickle down to consumers very much anyways because 20% lang yung market.
unless po ang intention nito is to supervene the contracts, although I don't see that here except for unless that's why I said it needs to be explained because the administered price for coal contracts, for example, that's 6 pesos. Does that mean this now prevails over the contracted price? It's not really clear.
Which we
Pero,
have,
attorney, wala bang quotation do sa contracts na halimbawa, nagkaroon ng ganitong gera sa Iran, no? At naka-index ang price ng coal sa gasoline. Meron ba quotation sa contract na pwedeng magbago yung presyo? Or talagang mananatiling yung contract ay sagrado, hindi yan magbabago?
Nakaukit na.
Kahit merong gulo, kahit may shortage, kahit ano. Para maunawaan ng
Normally
mga
po-
tao na bakit tataas o mananatili yung presyo ng kanilang kuryente.
Apo. Normally po yung contract sagrado. Hindi lang po dahil for the sake of having the sanctity of the contract, but it's meant to also protect the consumers. For example, kung ang contract nakasabi 5 pesos lang yan, kahit pa tumaas ng kung magkano yung sa merkado, protected yung consumers na hanggang 5 pesos lang ang sisingilin sa kanya. Some contracts do have what we call contract reopeners, but it's not blanket. Hindi po yan required sa lahat ng kontrata or hindi yan nakikita sa lahat ng kontrata.
pero I don't think that the government will, in this case, be able to take over those contracts.
Yeah.
The maraming legal issues yan. Even though I understand quasi-regulatory body naman talaga ang ERC, but I imagine that will be up against a lot of legal challenge.
I think all these things will, it's good that ERC scheduled the public consultation, I think very soon, I think tomorrow or Monday, because I think these are the things that need to be sorted out so that we know that we are proceeding on the basis of solid legal footing, right? We know that there are instability going on in the world, but we need to still observe what institutions are made for, which is to keep keep a solid ground on how things should be done.
Attorney, linawin ko lang ha, by way of managing expectations, kasi itong announcement na to, inaasahan ng mga tao, mate-temper yung kung sakasakali, yung pagtaas ng kuryente. Tama ba yung expectation na yun or it's not a guaranteed? Hindi siya actually, we cannot directly expect yung cause and effect na yun.
Opo. Siguro po nasa pagpapaliwanag ng ERC or ng Department of Energy kasi ang sinasabi din dito ng ERC, this is upon the recommendation of the Department of Energy. Siguro po kung nasa magpapaliwanag na itong presyo na nilagay dito sa administered price, kahit nasa kontrata yung presyo mo, walang halaga yon, ang gagamitin mo administered price, then we achieve that goal. But we need to sort out, as I think Regina mentioned, the legal implications of that, of supplanting the administered price over the contract price, because normally it just supplants the market price. So we need to, I think, medyo mag-abang po tayo ng pagpapaliwanag.
Attorney, almost 2/3 ng ating electricity is coal-based. Sa international market ba, tumataas din ang coal? Naapektuhan ba sila nitong gerang ito? Specifically sa main source natin ng coal sa Indonesia.
May konti pong pagtaas na nakita doon sa tinatawag nating NUC or Newcastle Index. As of last check ko po siguro mga last week, wala pa namang paggalaw doon sa tinatawag nating ICI or Indonesian Coal Index, kung saan tama po si Sir Ronald, doon kinukuha almost 100% of our imported coal. So hindi ko pa lang po na-check ulit kasi ngayon everyday gumagalaw talaga, kailangan mong bantayan yung merkado, but it's not directly linked to what's happening in the oil indices.
Ma'am, balik ko lang yung tanong ni Ami, but let me attack it from a different point of view or different perspective. I can imagine kasi a lot of people, drawing the parallel, parang yung suspension ng WESM para yung katumbas ng suspension ng old regulation law. Kung saan
Hindi, I guess it's also in the framing of the announcement kasi na this is to help.
Kaya tinatanong ko eh.
Oo,
Yeah.
this
Kasi
is
yun
to
ang inaasahan ng mga tao eh.
yun po, yun ang i-connect ng mga tao, or people who, the layman will think that way.
Yeah.
Yung unlearned.
What's the best way to explain to them exactly what is happening in
Or what
those
to
terms?
expect.
Sa pronouncements, based sa pronouncement.
Opo. I think ang klaro ay yun yung desired effect na umabot sa atin as consumers, yung pag-temper sa announcement na to or sa issuance na to, umabot sa atin yung intention ng gobyerno na ma-temper yung effect. Ang tanong nga lang ay will it produce that desired effect? Kasi nga, kung ang sitwasyon ay nakakontrata naman karamihan, pero ang kinokontrol mo, ang tinetemper mo yung market price, paano po maitatawid yung pagkontrol sa market price sa pagkontrol dun sa napakalaking porsyento, which is the contracted price? Siguro po yun yung kailangan nating itawid or kailangan ng ERC, ng DOE na itawid po para talagang makita yung ma-achieve yung desired effect ng issuance na ito.
Or kung sakali, sinong aako noong balanse between the contracted and tama ko ba?
Yun din po. Tama po. Kasi syempre yung generator, magbabayad din siya ng panggatong niya. Paano niya mababayaran yung panggatong niya?
Yeah.
Based on your experience, attorney, in times of crisis, although of course I know you didn't complete your term, pero what are yung players sa WESM na to, both the seller side, which is the power generators, power plants, at saka yung buyer side, which is yung distribution utilities, what are they like working, what's it like working with them? Are they generally amenable to recommendations, to adjustments, to requests from the government?
I think in situations like this, that we had a similar situation in 2022, if you
Ayaw nga
recall.
pala.
The start of the Ukraine war
Yes,
and
Yeah.
the Indonesian coal ban, temporary though it was at that time. So we had a similar situation. I think everybody has that cooperative stance in general. But I think reality also reality bites, as they say, kailangan ng pambayad ng generator, nung fuel na inaangkat niya para mapatakbo yung planta niya. So kung iko-control natin, suppress natin yung price, tatanungin ni generator, o sige, makikisama ako, pero paano ko po mababayaran yung utang ko naman dun sa supplier? And there were ways that were explored before, the deferred pricing, deferred charging mechanisms, all these things. So yung mga paraan na pwede nating magamit. WESM suspension has always been there, but as I mentioned earlier, iba po kasi yung triggers dati. It's the lack of generation.
Yeah.
That was the trigger before.
So almost similar din sa oil problem because there's only one refining plant here as well.
On another point, Attorney, kanina kasing umaga nakasabay ko si Attorney Leiko. Ang sabi niya ay itong National State of Energy Emergency ay una, too little too late. At ikalawa, hindi ganun ka-comprehensive kung inunuance mo na iba yung crisis sa pricing, iba yung crisis sa supply, at iba yung crisis sa economy. Ang dami masyadong nuancing, no?
Daming crisis wala nga crisis eh.
Kasi crisis is a crisis kaysa
Oo
sa...
nga, ikaw
Yes,
crisis ka
crisis
na
is a
crisis.
crisis.
Walang
Emergency na
crisis.
lang.
Ang hirap mag-nuance. So, nakakalito sa mga tao. May emergency ba o wala? Parang ganon. At ano yung laman? Ano yung substance nung declared state of energy emergency at ano yung mga proposals? Kaya, from your vantage point, anong tingin nyo? Nag-agree ba kayo kay Attorney Laiko na medyo masyadong nuance yung declaration?
I think to a certain extent po, kasi hindi natin kita doon sa EO kung ano ba talaga yung mga plano. But what I think was clear in the EO is a recognition that something needs to be done urgently. But what that something is, medyo nakaabang pa po tayo kung ano talaga yung gagawin. Kaya nga siguro ito pong nilabas ng ERC, medyo kailangan ding, the details still need to be sorted out because even the EO from which it springs, wala ding masyadong detalye. So to that extent, I agree po dun sa statement na nuanced naman talaga siya, nuanced yung sitwasyon. I don't think there has ever been before a declaration of national energy emergency. Parang first time po yata ito.
What other mechanisms for controlling prices would work in this instance without, fully, nationalizing the energy industry, the electricity industry? I'm not suggesting that, by the way.
Why not?
Because, of course, right now, off the back of this oil crisis, there's a lot of calls now. There's a bill making its way through Senate to re-regulate the oil industry. What about the power industry?
What do you don't like about nationalization?
The politicians. Go ahead, attorney.
Oo nga.
I think it's expected that there will be that reaction of how about let's just go back to the past. But it's because it's easy to forget what was in the past that drove us to where we are now, right? Because it was also the inability to sustain that kind of arrangement that led us to deregulation and privatization. So I think the question is, if we go back to the past, has the condition changed that triggered the departure from that past? Kaya na po ba natin, afford na po ba natin as a government to go back to nationalization? If not, ano po yung ibang pwede pa nating magawa? Like better, I suppose, better safety nets instead of just declaring, for example, a full privatization or full deregulation. Are there scalpel approaches rather than a bludgeon approach, which is, I think, what a bludgeon type of arrangement that we have right now. Like all of a sudden, every aspect of the industry is privatized and deregulated. But we need to talk
Yan ang
about
suggestion ng iba. Attorney, hybrid. Give the government some elbow room to intervene kung sakasakaling ganitong merong hindi crisis, this non-crisis, o di kung merong energy emergency.
Pero di ba,
Yan po
attorney,
yung suggest ng iba. You think that's workable?
Pero di ba,
That's
attorney,
workable, hybrid.
sa ating oil deregulation law, meron namang clause doon for government intervention in times of emergency or crisis.
No, Section 14.
Oh, nakalagay yun
Yes.
sa ating even an
Yes.
oil, hindi absolute yung deregulation. No? So, halimbawa, ngayon, kung talagang grabe yung crisis at saka yung emergency, ay pwede mag-intervene talaga. Actually, theoretically, pwedeng i-take over ng gobyerno yung ating oil industry. Nakalagay yun doon sa law mismo.
yes.
Oo, short
Tama-
of that.
tama,
Kasi
Sir
ayaw ng
Ronald.
Malacanang yan eh.
Opo, kasi
Sinabi
po,
ng Malacanang ayaw nila mag-take over.
yes, I think yung una kasi dyan, once you do a takeover, you really spook investors with a takeover. Second, kaya po ba? Kaya bang puntahan ng gobyerno lahat nung, for example, in the downstream oil industry, kaya ba niyang i-operate in lahat ng gas stations and even the refinery? Or does that mean anong klase pong arrangement yung magkakaroon if ever there's a takeover? I think those are the practical questions that need to be addressed also if government wants to trigger those draconian provisions in the laws.
Actually, that can be used as a threat para yung mga big players ay i-absorb nyo naman partially itong increases na ito. Wag lang laging pass on sa consumers. That can be used as a threat na ayaw namin ng draconian measure na ito. Pero kung yung ayaw nyong bawasan yung billions of dollars na kinikita nyo at lahat pasa lang sa consumers, lahat tayo tatamaan. Tatamaan kami, tatamaan din kayo. So, parang ganun lang eh. Kaya siguro isang dahilan para nilagay yun doon, not necessarily para i-implement. Pero at least, it's a message sa oil companies na tulong-tulong naman tayo rito.
Pero kung sakali nga, anong pwede? Kung gagawin ng hybrid, ano yung workable, yung pwedeng i-implement nga ng gobyerno? Ano yung pwede?
In the fuel sector po, for example, the tension actually arises aside from the private sector, the private car owners, for example, feeling that brunt, the middle class, which I think needs a different solution. But for the public transport sector, ang tension po nagmumula dun sa fact that deregulated yung fuel, pero yung taripa niya regulated. So palagi siyang naiipit dun sa gitna na ako na lang ba ng ako ang mag-absorb nung taas ng fuel on the part of the jeepney operator, taxi driver, bus operator. Dun po nagmumula yung tension. Baka naman pwede na yung fuel supply dun sa public transport sector regulated din. Para po kung i-keep natin, kung iiwan natin na regulated yung taripa. Kasi po may disconnect eh. Deregulated yung raw material nila, which is the fuel, but regulated yung price ng pagbenta nila, ng service nila, which is the tariff. It will always create this tension. On the power side, mas komplikado po yung usapan kasi mas komplikado yung value chain ng power sector. I think long-term solution there is really a migration from our current fuel sourcing, which is very dependent on imported fuel, to other sources, either renewable or other indigenous sources. Yun po yung nakikita kong solusyon doon.
Coming back to the suspension of the WESM, the wholesale electricity spot market, attorney, the other thing the ERC said that it will implement a modified pricing mechanism. So coal plants will be paid at fixed rates and natural gas plants will be paid based on their contracts. I think this speaks to what you were saying earlier na a lot of them are contracted already. Help us understand what the logic here is about yung coal plants being paid at fixed rates and natural gas plants at the contract prices. Bakit kailangan ng modified administered pricing mechanism?
Yun din po yung gusto ko din pong maintindihan.
Okay.
Kasi po, although admittedly the 6 pesos, if we base it only on the WESM prices for the last 4 weeks, the 6 pesos is quite generous. The average WESM price has been hovering around below 6 pesos. At least in Luzon, it has been around 4 pesos. I think in Visayas and Mindanao, the situation is a bit different. We saw certain spikes over the last few days
Sir,
in Mindanao
when you
in
say
particular.
generous for whom?
Generous for the
producers.
generators.
Yes.
Okay.
So I think that's why where the 6 pesos comes from will need to be explained or will need to be sorted out. So is it really just, maybe it's driven by that desire to have stable prices,
Supply.
wag ka nang gumalaw. Sige, bibigay ko na sa yung 6 pesos, wag ka na gumalaw. Baka naman po ganon. But we need to see the basis for the 6 pesos also.
Kaya lang, if it's generous, of course, then
It's not very generous for us.
it's not very generous for consumers. Sino
So
magbe-bear
parang
ng-
kung what you're saying is, medyo mataas, on the high side siya, I don't know if that's the right word for it, pero nga, on the other hand, baka that's a trade-off para we have a more stable,
Opo.
So they'll keep
stable supply. They keep producing.
they keep generating para ma-ensure yung stability of the supply.
Dali namang ipaliwanag ng gano'n yan. Dali namang ipaliwanag yan. Kahit onerous yung terms.
Onerous.
Sabi mo, oh, we're helping you, we're stabilizing. Oh, di ba?
Sa bagay. Kaya lang, as attorney explained earlier, I mean, the coal imports is also, I mean, there's a question there, what if the war drags on, let's say, months, knock on wood, hopefully not, pero we have to face that possibility. And then what happens to the coal imports? Diba?
I think the more critical question here is how is this suspension pricing really intends to work? Does it supplant the contracted pricing? In which case medyo tumatawid na po tayo, hindi lang yung merkado yung pinapakailaman natin, pati yung kontrata yung presyo sa kontrata na yung pinapakailaman natin. So I think those things will need to be sorted out, and then we can talk about whether it's a fair price or not. But fundamentally, I think we need to understand how this is designed to work to reach that objective of cushioning the impact on the consumers.
Fair. Okay, we'll leave that there. Thank you so much for explaining all of that to us. It was very technical, but we now have a better grasp of yung wholesale spot market. That was, but we'll leave that there. Thank you so much, Power Industry Specialist and former ERC Chair, Attorney Mona Timalanta. Salamat, ma'am.
Salamat,
Salamat po.
attorney.
Thank you, attorney.
And
Okay.
we are on until 5:30 p.m. Storycon will be right back after a short break. Please stay tuned.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.
Welcome back to Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao, Silvia Ronald Llamas, and Ami Pamintuan. So anong takeaway dun sa with Attorney Dimalanta?
The takeaway is
May 6 pesos.
the intention is good.
Taas yung pati siya sabi niya very generous.
Oo nga.
Generous for whom?
The intention is good. Here's
Will it
hoping.
have the desired effect?
Here's hoping it has the desired effect, which is to temper yung rise of electricity prices.
Masyado ka namang
Depende din yan.
Kasi baka
Intention-
maging pareho yan
intention is good.
itong batas na to na excise tax eh.
The intention is,
Asang-asa lahat ngayon, wala nangyayari.
the intention is good dahil kikita na naman sila.
Pero wala pang final eh. If I'm getting her right, pag-uusapan pa yan with
Wala pa
stakeholders
nga.
dun sa ano,
Kaya
dun sa,
nga.
sa
Nagpo-public
actual,
But
Also-
you're raising public
Oo.
expectations eh.
Oo.
But
So,
they're
Diba?
also
Yan
holding
ang problema dyan.
they're holding public consultations now.
I-stabilize namin ang prices, pero bigay nyo sa amin yung aming gusto. Nice intention.
Uy, by the way, correct ko lang yung fake news mo I'm not against regulation. But in order to make regulation work, you need a strong state. Right? So,
Kailangan natin.
kunyari, babalik mo na
Tama.
naman yung mag-create ka naman ng
Not just a
OPSF.
strong state, a strong progressive state.
Oh, thank you. A
Because
strong
a strong
progressive
state can be a fascistic state.
That's also true. It could be an authoritarian
Tingnan
state.
niyo kung sino yung mga nakaupo dyan sa ano.
Oh. So-
Unang-una sa Kongreso.
Correct.
Mga politiko.
So it's not that I'm against regulation, but do we have a strong progressive state is the question. Would you trust an
people
oil
who
price?
run the state.
Kung babalik natin ng OPSF, Oil Price Stabilization Fund, do you trust the politicians to implement it correctly?
With the present regulatory capture? Of course not.
Kaya nga, exactly.
Regulatory capture
Exactly. At mukhang baka hindi magbago yung setup na yan until 2028 and beyond. Kaya be careful what you wish for.
Careful what you
Pero depende sa 2028.
Oh, ano mo? Meron ka na namang...
Anong chismis mo?
Malay mo kung magkaroon ka ng bagong a more, not necessarily progressive, strong state,
But?
an approximation of that.
Pwede na yun. I'll accept that. An approximation of that is
strong,
okay.
progressive state na at least i-regulate ang regulatory capture.
Kapag depende sa
Realistic.
nakaupo, di ba? Yan ang problema natin.
Hindi remove eh. Regulate mo muna.
As some business people say, 10% corruption is something that they can take. 15%, okay.
Yeah.
So, pareho lang
Moderate
yun.
Tawag
the
dyan.
greed.
Moderate your greed.
Tawag dyan sa Singapore tsaka sa Malaysia ay predictable levels of corruption.
Oh,
Para
exactly.
mapapactor
Oh,
Because they can plan
sa
around that.
cost ng
Exactly.
negosyo.
Oh, I like
Pag lumampas ka dyan,
Yan ang
ka.
wala sa
Parang
atin.
ganun. Predictable
Yung
levels of
predictability.
corruption.
People will accept some level of corruption. Wag lang naman yung 2
If they
trillion.
get the results they paid for. That's very important.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't have to be a... Yeah.
Kasi merong nagkwento sa akin yan, Ronald, one of the biggest investors here local, na may mga negosyo elsewhere. Sabi niya, di lang naman Pilipinas ang may corruption at all over in many countries. Pero sabi niya, ang problema dito sa atin, nagbayad ka na sa isa, you don't get what you pay for, may dadating na isang tropang bago, bayad ka na naman, you will not get what you pay for, and on and on and on. Yan ang problema, sabi niya.
Daming humihingi.
Sa ibang bansa daw, at least yung binayaran mo, you get what you paid for.
So you're saying even the corrupt are unreliable.
You get your money's worth.
Ayun! Oo nga, you get your money's worth. Yeah, exactly, yun ang sinabi niya.
Diba? Sana the
This is
corrupt
one
people
of the
are people
biggest
you can trust.
businessmen here.
At ikalawa, yung sinasabi ng ibang bansa, yung halimbawa, meron kang 5 to 10% na kinita, no? Ay ibabalik mo sa bansa. Huwag mo naman ilabas lahat. Ibig
Yeah,
sabihin, it
reinvest
becomes
to.
part of the circulation of money,
dito nandun
profits,
lahat sa
employment sa
Switzerland.
loob. No? Kaya kung halimbawa, si Manny Mugato, no? Nagkaroon ng 5 billion, huwag naman niya ilabas yung 5 billion. Ilabas lang niya yung 100 million.
Pabinibili
I-reinvest
naman
dito.
niya.
Dito kumikita lahat, puro yung Swiss banks eh.
Oo nga. So, hindi ka
Hindi
Yan
na
ang
uso
problema.
yun. Ano na ngayon? Cayman Islands na yung mga ganun.
Switzerland.
Tsaka Bitcoin.
No, it's Switzerland pa rin.
Okay. You want good news? The good news is dumating na yung oil from Russia.
Oo, gano'ng
Oh,
karami?
di ba yung sarap yan?
Petron. Sa Petron
Yeah.
dinideliver.
Ang tanong niya, gano'ng karami?
700,000 barrels of oil.
Yeah.
So, 1.5 days.
Dumating na.
Well, that's
Dinala sa
still
Lima,
supply.
Bataan
Every
Refinery.
little
Yeah,
bit,
that's crude. Crude
every
oil.
little
That's
bit
crude.
helps.
I-refine pa yon ng
Pero
petrol.
naniwala ka ba
Hindi,
doon sa
dinala na sa
45 days
refinery sa Bataan.
na
Yeah.
reserve?
Dinala na. At least meron.
At least meron.
Kaya
And
lang, ewan natin.
yung consignee ng shipment na to is Petron nga. Sila lang naman nag-i-import ng crude because they're the
Petron.
only ones that can refine
Hindi
it.
nandun na.
Yeah.
But it will take 2 to 3
So-
weeks to refine that.
Sa Limay
At least
Port.
pandagdag dun sa natin, yung non-existent reserve.
Mga 3 weeks ang refining yan.
non-existent reserve.
At least sigurado ka meron kang langis after 3 weeks.
Na 1.5 days.
Kasi,
President Marcos may order fuel excise tax cut by April 12 or 13.
Sinabi sa inyo, mid-March eh.
Mid-April.
Mid-March siya.
So mid-March yung start ng bilangan.
Yung start.
Yeah.
Yung tinignan ko yung date eh. Kailan ba naging 80? Mid-March.
Yeah, by
Kaya
April 12 or
maghihintay
13.
po tayo lahat. Kaya wala akong good news ngayong araw sa Diseña.
The good news is we have a date. By April, by April 12
Well,
or
you have a
13,
date, but-
he might call for the suspension of fuel excise taxes.
so that means
Kapag
cutting
by that
back
time,
the prices
by
of...
that time, si Trump nasa Cuba na, sasabihin sa kanya, too late the hero ka.
Basically, that means cutting back the prices of gasoline by 10 pesos and diesel by 6.
I give you a hand, you ask for an arm. It's 10 pesos per liter. That is,
Kaya
Diesel
tuloy
by
ngayon,
6
binibigyan
pesos.
ng
What
mga
we
tao
have.
yung VAT eh.
okay, this is what we have.
Yeah. Ang kailangan kasi ngayon mga ayuda eh. Katulad ng tinignan natin kanina na mga transport workers, no. Definitely kailangan nila ng yung 5,000, it's 1.5 days, no. So, meron namang pagkukuhanan eh. Meron kang contingent fund na 13 billion, meron kang calamity funds na 40
Ulit-ulitin nyo yan,
billion.
Ronald, at baka marinig kayo.
Meron kang 40 billion, tapos meron kang 230 billion na disposable sa DBM, tapos meron ka pang kahit pa paano madadagdag na mga confidential at saka intelligence fund if you cut them
No,
by half.
Ako, walang maglalabas niyan.
Exactly. Nobody has said they're
Kaya nga.
gonna let go of their confidential fund.
Dinedma nga ng Malacanang eh. Pero
Wala
baka
nga.
pag
Ang sinasabi-
nilakas-lakasan yung
Ang
sigaw.
Opo.
Ang sinasabi ko lang, merong possible sources ng
Yeah.
pondo
Yeah.
para sa emergency. Hindi pwede sabihin ng gobyerno, ay wala kaming pera, wala kaming pang-ayuda.
Tingnan mo yung
hanggang-"
pila, kawawa naman, Remember, kapag pumila yung driver, they lose at least 1/2 day,
Yeah.
Kaya dun sa ibang lugar kahapon, dahil sa katagalan ng kaiintay ng mga driver, wala daw mga jeep. Kahit hindi pa umpisa yung strike. Kasi pumila yung mga driver for their 5,000.
So they lose half a day so that they can get enough money for
5,000.
gas for a day and a half.
Oh. Yun
Saka,
na nga.
Juan, meron ka mga GOCC na hindi mo pwedeng kunin ng pera, hindi pwedeng kunin ng gobyerno, pero pwede mo silang kumbinsihin na halimbawa, moratorium sa mga utang ng kanilang members
Yes.
at
You mean
bibigyan
just
mo
like
ng...
during the pandemic?
Tapos bibigyan mo sila ng mga ng calamity fund o loans na
Merong-
pwedeng staggered ang bayaran next year.
Oo nga.
So marami kang pwedeng trillions ang pondo ng mga GOCC, hindi lang billions. So
What?
pwede silang
Yung
tumulong
GOCC,
dito.
oh.
Pwede silang tumulong. Kakausapin lang yan Mga bossing, hindi namin pwedeng galawin yung pera mo. Pwede bang ikaw na mismo ang mag-volunteer na gawin ito?
You mean just like they did with Maharlika?
Hindi ko alam kung naglaman sa Maharlika.
Di ba, kinuha nila yung funds from Land Bank and DBP
Pero
and GISS.
may gray area dyan. Dahil may
PDIC.
mga kanyan May mga sariling kanyan konstitusyon.
Charter.
Of course.
Katulad
They
dineklara
cannot,
ng Supreme
oo.
Court, yung ginawa nyo sa PhilHealth, hindi na pwedeng gawin. Kaya ang gagawin nitong mga GOCC, sila na mismo
Correct.
mag-volunteer.
Once again, moral suasion.
Yes.
Baka
dahil
naman
may crisis At yung nag-appoint sa mga board nila, gobyerno Oo. So merong iba't ibang paraan yan para...
Pero
I
kung wala
agree.
sa charter, yan ang sasabihin ng mga yan, Ronald. Lahat ng nasa gobyerno ngayon takot They are worried about they might draw attention to whatever they're doing
But I mean,
Yung confidential fund mo, baka pwede mong dikdikin yung mga na, oy, labas nyo na yung yung
the difference-
contingency, kung nung mga terminology dyan.
the difference, Ami, is this is a crisis that we're all suffering from.
Yeah.
Right? Yung PhilHealth naman, where did they move the money to? Saan nila dinivert?
Hindi sila nag-divert yung Congress.
Binalik sa Treasury.
May PIP.
Oo.
unprogrammed
Hindi, kaya
funds.
nga, it was meant for the unprogrammed. Hindi lang natuloy. But they were able to
Return.
They were able to
Pinabalik.
transfer
Pinabalik.
how many billions already.
Kaya nga, baka mademanda sila eh.
Before,
Baka mademanda yung sasabihin
oo
eh.
nga. My point being, nakapag-transfer na sila ng ilang billion before it was ordered to be returned by the Supreme Court
Pinasole.
after they were sued. Pero that was for their own use.
Yes.
That
At
was for their-
gobyerno ang kumuha.
And the difference here is that we're in a crisis. Even though recently lang inamin ng Malacanang, this is a crisis
There's
that
no
everyone
crisis.
is suffering from. It's not a weather disaster. It's not a weather calamity. But, with the prices of everything going up. And by the way, may isang economist nagsabi sa akin, yung pass-through cost sa agriculture, hindi pa yan nakikick in. Kasi peak harvest
Hindi
period.
pa nararamdaman.
Peak harvest period tayo ngayon. Ma-feel natin yan sometime July, August. Right? So after the harvest season ends.
Tumaas na presyo ng pataba. Sabi nga ni Secretary Chudorel,
fertilizer.
from 1.5 naging 2.7 na, pero mararamdaman mo yan pag
Pero
tinaniman at nagano.
kailangan mo kasi ng gasolina para i-deliver yung produkto sa sakahan papunta sa
Iba pa yun.
Diba? At ang may control niyan, mga middlemen, na sila practically ang nagdi-dictate ng pricing.
Correct.
So, yan yung mga invisible hand.
That's why hindi natin ma-feel yun fully until maybe July or August, a few months from now. So again,
So kahit bumaba na yung presyo ng gasolina, may hahabol pa rin sa ating wami.
may hahabol pa because we import most of our fertilizer input, which is urea, unfortunately.
Meron daw recommendation sa bigas sa import lang naman. Price cap on imported rice, ang inirekomenda nila 50 per kilo.
Yeah.
Yan, bago yan.
O sa bagay, since we're in a state of national emergency na, the President can impose price caps.
Yan yung sinabi sa atin ni di ba?
Ni
Sabi niya
Secretary
mag-price control na lang mas mabilis sa fuel.
Oh, pero kailangan nila
Yun
maging
ang- yun ang
stricto
sabi ng
dahil
ano.
alam ko may nagrereklamo na may 60 tsaka 70 per kilo. No, ibig sabihin may mga profiteers na.
Di ba si Ami,
Ito,
you paid, was it 60?
Yung yung dati kong hindi imported dyan.
Okay.
Yung dati kong 49 umakyat na ng mga 56 to 57. Ganun siya. Saka maraming mga variety na wala ngayon. Hindi binibenta. Hindi ko alam kung bakit.
Baka shipping cost din, hindi makapag-import.
Yes.
Baka yung imported yung nawala.
Oo.
Yun lang, kung sinasabi lang
Pero
naman
pag
natin.
ganyang kasi maraming mga gusto ng imported rice, mas mura eh. Pag kinap nila yon ng 50, mapipilitan yung mga local na to temper the increase. Kung sakali lang.
Yung sinasabi lang natin, yung whole of nation approach. Halimbawa, yung pinindown natin sa Asidre rito, yung pagpapat, inulit niya kinabukasan. No? At
Ano yung pagpapat?
yung part ng salary nila, 25-30%, ipapat nila as partly symbolic, partly substantial. Na
Symbolic lang yun, maliit lang
yung
yun
mga congressmen, senators,
Ibibigay
governors, cabinet secretaries, ipapat siya parang kasama sa emergency fund natin. No?
Kanina bibigay yung fund?
25%
Sa
lang?
gobyerno. Initially.
Tsaka yung malaki sa kanila, hindi yung sweldo, yung malaki sa kanila yung mga MOE, tsaka yung mga
MOE,
allowance, tsaka yung...
Hindi, yung
300,000
MOE kasi
nga yung sweldo nila.
kasama yun sa staffing sa Kongreso, kasama yan
yung stopping,
sa
hindi naman
mga
ganun
kwan.
kalaki yung stopping talaga.
Kasama yan dun sa...
operations nila yung
kasama yan dun sa operations, mga transportation, etc. Mga clothing.
Clothing.
Sama yan sa clothing allowance.
I get yung mga staffing kasi tao yan eh. Pero I don't think that the bulk of their MOE goes to staffing.
Yes.
Kasi laki ng MOE
Office
nila
lang
eh.
yun eh. Di ba office lang
Maraming
yun?
transport,
Office
kung
yun.
ano-ano.
Basically, MOE is office.
Transport,
Operations.
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 Representation.
Tsaka kung ano pang gusto ng paggastusan
Representation.
actually. Basically yun. Kung ano gusto ng paggastusan. And wala rin
yan.
liquidation yun eh.
Yan. Representation. Yung mga ganon. Yan.
Sa amin kasi, pati yung clothing, ang nagpapasya yung partido eh. Kaya dati, nung si Eta Rosales, nagreklamo. Lahat yan, kanyan, partido yan eh. Dahil party list eh.
Oh.
Nandun ka, not because you're a district representative. Nandun ka dahil
Sa
representative
party
ng
list
the
lang,
party.
ano.
So, yung lahat ng gastos mo, ang magdidetermine yan is the party. Halimbawa, sahod mo, masyadong malaki yan, so part niyan, bibigay mo sa partido. Ganun ba?
Socialist style.
Oo. Hindi naman, social democratic.
Oh, just...
Alam, may matitira naman sa'yo.
Iba kasi dating pag sabi mo, mapupunta sa partido yung...
Oo, dahil
Ay, no,
meron
no.
kang mga member sa party na mababa ang sahod, hindi naman pwede yung representative mo sobrang laki ng agwat.
Happy-happy.
Diba? Oo.
Okay, on that note. Again, the good news is, dumating na yung oil from Russia.
Oo nga.
Rin siya.
At least meron.
The bad
Crude
news
oil.
ay tuloy pa rin ang
siya
gera.
yung optimist.
At sa ngayon, medyo nag-broaden yung gera dahil Syria ay inatake na ng Iraq at yung Syria gaganti sa Iraq at iipitin yung mga Kurds
And-
sa Iran at saka sa Iraq.
And then the other bad news is you're funding the war in Ukraine. Ano ka ba? We have to end on
Hindi,
good
para
news.
lang Juan, para may positive
Ay,
negative.
oo nga.
Ay,
Ikaw talaga.
dalawa. Ang good news,
Sinabi na eh.
yan sa bukas.
That's true. That's
Okay.
true. Can't argue with
Problema
that.
doon, di ba?
Thank you for joining
Kasundo tayo doon.
Thank you for joining Storycon today. Ami Pomendon, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star, Ronald Llamas, our resident political pundit. Join us again tomorrow, 4 p.m. For Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao, kapatid. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Alam ko, resident.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.